Martin Scorsese is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. I am simply in awe of him on multiple fronts. In particular, the incredible longevity of his career, which began in the late 1960s and is still going today, unmatched by anybody of his generation, especially when you consider Scorsese still makes mainstream movies. He hasn't wandered off into the abyss making obscure stuff no one watches. And these movies are still brilliant, they're still challenging. His style evolves as he evolves. His topics mature. He innovates with 3D like Hugo. He experiments with alternative movie genres. He's brave enough to follow up blockbuster crowd pleasers like The Wolf of Wall Street with a personal small religious movie. There is simply nobody on Scorsese's level. Spielberg perhaps comes close, but he always comes across to me as someone who's in the Hollywood crowd, inside looking out, whereas Scorsese, in his own words, is not a Hollywood director, he's an in spite of Hollywood director, still fighting to get projects made, still battling to get scripts greenlit. It boggles my mind that this guy is in his mid-80s and still juggling multiple film projects. People pray that their mental faculties are still working at that age, that they aren't being wheeled around in an old people's home, and yet this guy is headlining $200 million juggernaut films. I genuinely believe that we haven't quite grasped the legacy and brilliance of this man, and we won't until after he dies and tributes start pouring in and that huge gap in cinema is felt. I can envisage people going through his filmography thinking, holy moly, this guy directed all these movies? If you ignore maybe Boxcar Bertha and perhaps one or two of his early films he made when he was a student, I honestly think you have a strong case that Scorsese has never made a bad film. I mean, a person could bow out with what Scorsese made in the 70s and 80s and still be considered one of the Hollywood New Wave's finest filmmakers. But it's 2025 at the time of the making of this video, and still the most anticipation I have for an upcoming film is whatever Scorsese decides to do next. One complaint about Scorsese that really infuriates me is that same old tired claim that he only makes gangster movies. It's very irritating that you could take his body of work, his passion for the craft, his energy, his inventiveness, and reduce it to summarizing the man as a director of mob movies. I mean, first of all, how many mob movies has Scorsese actually made? There's Mean Streets, there's Goodfellas, there's Casino, and The Irishman. That's 4 films. Okay, maybe you want to include Gangs of New York and The Departed, but now we're kind of stretching it because these are more broad crime films, not concerned with the Italian-American mob, which is what Scorsese is often associated with. So I'll give you 6 films, but he's directed 26, 27 movies. So take away those 6 and we're still talking about a filmography of 20 films. Through maths alone, the argument that he makes only mob films is ridiculous. For context, he has 4 pure mob films, and yet he's directed 5 music documentaries. So he's done more music docs than mob films. So why don't we know him as that guy who makes music documentaries if we're going by numbers alone? The implication, really, is that he must be known as a director of mob movies because those very mob movies are so good it becomes impossible to detach them from him. If that's the case, then what's the problem? Why is it a bad thing, even if he just makes mob films again and again, if the films themselves are good? And he is an author who makes films about things he feels close to. He grew up in that lifestyle. Should we also complain about Spike Lee making movies about African Americans and racism? Should we complain about Wes Anderson's signature aesthetic? Or Woody Allen always making romantic films following middle-class neurotic New Yorkers? That's who they are. That's what they know. That's the character of their movies. It's called having a style, being an author. What does Scorsese have to do? Take on a Marvel project to prove he has the goods? If his filmography was only his gangster films, Mean Streets, Goodfellas, Casino and The Irishman, and then he checked out, he'd surely go down as an amazing film director. In fact, I would argue, when you factor in the amount of films he's made, rather than be a one-note director, Scorsese is actually the most versatile in Hollywood in terms of film genres. Apparently he doesn't make films about women, and yet Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore is a fantastic raw and real movie following the struggles of a single mother. Taxi Driver is a gritty psychological drama. New York, New York is a musical. Raging Bull is a biopic of an unstable boxer. The King of Comedy and After Hours are dark screwball comedies. The Color of Money is a sequel. The Last Temptation is a risky religious movie. Cape Fear is a Hitchcock throwback updated for modern brutal times. The Age of Innocence is a period romance. Kundun is a Dalai Lama biopic. Bringing Out the Dead is a psychological thriller following an exhausted ambulance driver, and, by the way, is perhaps Scorsese's most underrated film. The Aviator is a Howard Hughes biopic. Shutter Island is a popcorn mystery thriller. Hugo is a kids' film. The Wolf of Wall Street is a sex, drugs and rock and roll caper. Silence is another religious film. And Killers of the Flower Moon is a period drama that could be called something of a western. Where on earth does anyone get off reducing all of that to saying he only makes gangster movies? It's ridiculous. And then consider Scorsese's work beyond feature-length movies. He has an extensive and varied body of work that spans several forms of media and genres, which includes documentaries that he squeezes in between his films, like The Last Waltz, No Direction Home, Pretend It's a City, Public Speaking, George Harrison Living in the Material World, Italian American, and A Personal Journey with Martin Scorsese through American movies, which is a film lover's guide through American cinema. He's also directed and produced television shows like Boardwalk Empire and Vinyl. He's also made several short films, ignoring commercials for the likes of Chanel or Apple. Some good ones are The Big Shave he did in the 1960s, that was a student film that is considered an allegory of the Vietnam War, and Life Lessons, which is a fantastic little film as part of the anthology film New York Stories, which he did with Woody Allen and Francis Ford Coppola, which follows a troubled, jealous artist unable to paint days before a scheduled gallery exhibition of his work. Alfred Hitchcock fans will love a 10-minute film he did called The Key to Reserva, which is basically an advert, but the overall gist is that it's a comedy where Scorsese has found an unfinished Hitchcock screenplay and he tries to film it. And the fake film he creates is legitimately good. It really does feel like a Hitchcock film. Scorsese is also deeply committed to film preservation, creating the Film Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to restoring and preserving world cinema, and he's also helped restore films from directors like Fellini, Powell and Pressburger, and other films from neglected film cultures such as African or Indian. Scorsese is also an academic who has taught other veteran film directors like Spike Lee and Oliver Stone, and he's written essays, taught classes, lectured, even put himself in the crosshairs of many Hollywood folk, like with that article he wrote years back criticizing Marvel movies. And he even does acting roles from time to time. He even starred in an Akira Kurosawa movie. The guy is a machine whose passion for cinema is matched by the actual tangible things he's done for the industry.